My dear. Sometimes the quietest betrayals are the ones that echo the longest. They don't shout or break dishes. No, they sit polite at the table, pour your tea, smile like nothing's wrong, all the while holding something sharp behind the eyes. This story, she always served me tea with a smile, until I switched cups and learned the truth, is one of those. A slow unraveling, a soft-spoken storm. And mercy me, it still chills me when I think on it. If you cherish stories that simmer with suspicion and sorrow, I'd be mighty grateful if you'd subscribe, leave me a note down below, and pass this along to someone who might feel seen in it. We never know who's wearing what mask until it slips. Now come sit a spell. Let me take you back. The porcelain clinked just the same as it always did. Same blue floral cup, same gentle pour from the spout of that old teapot she brought over from Cairo. Same sugar cube, same practiced smile. But that day, that single day, I chose to switch cups. I tasted something I never had before. It wasn't the bitterness of the tea. It was the bitterness of truth. She blinked when I reached for her cup instead of mine. Just a flicker, like a curtain twitching in a wind that shouldn't be there. And in that blink my whole world shifted. I saw the way her fingers hesitated on the handle. The way her smile tightened, too white, too perfect. I saw the truth, hidden under all the pleasantries and jasmine-scented lies. It was in the cup. But more than that, it was in the silence that followed. We both knew. And we both pretended not to. But you don't come back from a thing like that, my dear. Not unchanged. It started with a teacup. Not a grand gesture or a lightning bolt of revelation, just a teacup, and a woman I trusted more than I trusted most. Her name was Safa, and for 8 years she'd sat in my kitchen every Thursday afternoon at 3 o'clock sharp, like clockwork, with that same calm grace, that same hush of silk and cardamom. Charleston sun would pour through my kitchen window, painting the linoleum floor gold. Muffin would be curled up under the table, purring like a kettle near boil. And Safa, she'd be there pouring my tea, her hand steady, her voice like water over stones. "You need sweetness today?" she'd ask, already knowing the answer. It became our ritual, our lifeline. You see, after Charles passed, mercy, has it really been 8 years? I stopped talking to most people. The world grew louder and emptier all at once. But Safa, she never pushed. She'd just bring her tea, her stories, her calm presence, and sit with me like I was worth the time. So when I tell you I trusted her, I mean it the way roots trust the soil. Quietly, deeply, without question. Until that Thursday. I don't know why I reached for her cup instead of mine. Maybe I was distracted. Maybe something in my bones whispered for me to. All I know is I did. And the taste, mercy me, it wasn't tea I tasted. It was the metallic tang of something I can't explain. Like betrayal brewed into the leaves. She watched me. Didn't blink, didn't speak. Just sat there, hands folded, waiting. Like a woman sitting through her own trial. And in that moment the years between us collapsed. All the afternoons, the laughter, the quiet grief we shared. It all folded in on itself like paper turned to ash. I said nothing. Neither did she. But the truth had already been served. And from that day forward, nothing was the same. If you'd asked me back then who Safa was to me, I'd have told you she was family. Not by blood, no. But in every way that mattered. She came into my life the same season Charles left it. I just buried my husband beneath a canopy of Carolina oaks, the air thick with magnolia and morning. And there I was, 62, widowed, house too quiet, hands too still. My children, bless them, were kind but distant. Olivia lived in Atlanta, busy with her 3 boys and that traveling husband of hers. Marcus, my sweet boy, was still in the Navy then, somewhere near Okinawa. I remember praying he wouldn't hear about his daddy's death until I could steady myself enough to break it right. That's when Safa arrived. She was new to the neighborhood. Moved in 2 doors down into the yellow house with the flaking shutters. A widow herself, she told me later. Her husband, Amir, had died in Cairo. Something about the war, though she never did say which one. And I never did press. What struck me first was her stillness. Safa moved like someone who'd been through fire and come out forged. Tall, graceful, always in linen or cotton. Never jeans, and always wearing a soft cream scarf around her head, pinned under the chin with a little silver rose. She brought me a casserole the day she introduced herself. Lentil and lamb, seasoned with something I didn't know but couldn't forget. "I heard your husband passed," she said gently, eyes like warm earth. I thought you might not be cookin' much. I wasn't. I could barely eat. We stood on my porch that first day for what felt like an hour, talkin' low like the air itself was too fragile to disturb. She didn't offer sympathy like other folks. No, he's in a better place, or, you'll find your strength. Just silence. Presence. And that casserole. The next week she came by with tea. It's from Egypt, she said, as she unpacked her little bag onto my counter like we'd known each other years. I always brew it with mint and a touch of orange blossom. Good for sadness. I didn't argue. We drank in silence. And so it began. Every Thursday after that, rain or shine, she'd arrive at 3 o'clock with that same quiet care. She never gossiped, never rushed. Just brewed, poured, and sat with me in the grief. I came to crave it. Not just the tea but her rhythm. Her steadiness. Her way of seeing me without flinchin'. Over the years she helped me find a kind of peace. She taught me how to steep dried hibiscus, how to grind coriander for lentil soup, how to tie a silk scarf so it stayed put in wind. I taught her how to prune roses, how to make cornbread with bacon grease, and how to curse like a lady when the plumbing acted up. But the thing about grief, my dear, is it binds people in invisible threads. You don't always see the knots for men, until the tug comes. And I didn't know it yet, but those knots between us were tangled in more than comfort. They were tangled in need, in secrets. And one day they'd snap. Now I ain't never been one to pry. I was raised to mind my business and let folks tell their story when they're good and ready. And Safa, well, she told hers in crumbs. I knew her late husband had been some kind of professor, political science she once let slip. I knew she'd left Egypt in a hurry. That much was clear from the way her hands would tremble ever so slightly whenever the news mentioned Cairo. I knew she had a grown daughter, Layla, who lived in Montreal and never called enough. And I knew she liked her tea strong and her silence stronger. What I didn't know, what I never thought to ask, was why she never drank from the same cup twice. I noticed it maybe 2 years into our friendship. She always brought 2 cups, hand-painted, delicate things, never a matching set. One for me, one for her. And each time hers would be different. A lilac one with gold trim one week. A pale green one the next. Sometimes they looked so fine I was afraid to touch them. But her own? She handled it like it was nothing. Sipped slow, fingers wrapped around the porcelain like it was armor. One Thursday I asked, "Why so many cups?" She smiled, that soft crescent smile she had when she didn't want to answer fully. They each hold different memories. I let it be. Looking back now, I should have wondered more. But mercy me, when someone becomes your ritual, you stop questioning. You just receive. Like church. And make no mistake, Thursday tea became my sanctuary. The rest of the week could be chaos. Doctor appointments, roof leaks, calls from Olivia complaining about her marriage, calls from Marcus too short to feel real. But Thursdays were sacred. Until the day that man came to my door. I remember it like the hush before a storm. Early April. The azaleas had just bloomed, stubborn and wild as ever. I was in the garden, elbow deep in mulch, when he pulled up in a plain sedan, not from around here. Wore a brown suit that looked like it hadn't been tailored to him, and shoes that hadn't touched southern dirt in a long while. He introduced himself as Mahmoud, said he was looking for Safa. I didn't think much of it then. Folks come and go. But there was something off in the way he said her name, clipped, cold like a verdict instead of a woman. She hasn't returned my letters, he said. I need to speak with her. It's important. I told him Thursdays were best. He nodded but didn't smile. Safa never mentioned him. When she came that week, her eyes were darker, rimmed with fatigue. Her scarf was a deeper shade of blue than usual, almost black. She didn't bring tea that day. Said her hands hurt. I offered to make some myself, and she watched me the whole time, silent, alert like a cat watching birds through the window. She didn't drink hers. Just held the cup. Let the steam vanish. Sometimes, she said, more to herself than to me, the past catches up in cups. I didn't understand, but I would. Soon. Very soon. The knock came 3 days later. Not gentle like a neighbor's. Not rushed like a package man. It was sharp. Measured. The kind of knock that didn't ask permission, it announced. I wiped my hands on my apron, heart skipping a beat as Muffin darted under the hallway bench. My first thought was Olivia, but she always called first. Second thought, that man. Mahmoud. I was right. He stood straighter than before. Suit the same. Eyes colder. I need to speak to her, he said, no greeting. Today. I should have sent him away. But something in me, that same southern steel that keeps a woman standin' at funerals, held the door open. She'll be here Thursday, I said. Same as always. He hesitated, then handed me a sealed envelope. Give her this. She'll know. And just like that he was gone. I turned the envelope over. No name.
No stamp.
Just an ivory slip with a wax seal I couldn't place. Not English, not Arabic. A symbol like an open eye with a crescent above it. I tucked it into the silverware drawer. When Thursday came, Safa was different. She wore no scarf, the first time in 8 years. Her dark hair, streaked with silver, was pulled into a tight knot. Her eyes didn't search mine like they usually did. They searched the room. Corners. Windows. Shadows. I handed her the envelope without a word. She stared at it. Where did you get this? She asked, voice barely a breath. He gave it to me. Said you'd know. She didn't open it. She set it on the table like it might detonate. Did he say anything else? No. Just that. Silence stretched. Her hands trembled. For the first time, I saw the cracks in her poise. She didn't stay long that day. Didn't pour tea. Didn't smile. Just left the envelope unopened and said, "Tell him I got it." That was the first Thursday she didn't stay the hour. The next morning, I opened the envelope myself. I know, my dear, I shouldn't have. But mercy. Sometimes curiosity ain't a sin. Sometimes it's a survival instinct. Inside was a photograph. Black and white. Grainy. Safa, much younger, standing on the steps of a government building, flanked by 2 men in suits. She was holding something, a file? A folder? Her face was stern. Determined. On the back, written in Arabic, were 2 lines. I couldn't read 'em, but I knew even then. This was no ordinary past she was hiding from. This was a life built on something that could crumble everything. That photograph haunted me. I tucked it back in the envelope, slid it under a stack of recipe clippings, but my thoughts wouldn't leave it be. I'd lie in bed, ceiling phantom and lazy above me, wondering who those men were beside her. What she was holding. What truth was locked behind those eyes that had once looked at me like a sister. And then that Sunday I saw her daughter. It was early, near dawn. The dew was still on the grass, and I was out front deadheading my roses. A car pulled into Safa's driveway, silver, rental plates. A tall woman stepped out, slender and dressed in black from head to toe. Hair loose, sharp chin. Same eyes as her mother, but colder. Like all the warmth had skipped a generation. She didn't knock. She let herself in with a key. I watched from behind my hydrangea bush, pretending to tend to the soil, but really just listening. I couldn't hear much. The windows were shut, but after a few minutes a voice rose. Not Safa's. It was younger, clipped. Furious. You should have told me. Then a crash, glass or porcelain, I couldn't tell. And then silence. When the daughter left an hour later, she didn't even glance toward me. Just drove off, tires kicking up dust. The next Thursday, Safa didn't come. I waited, brewed my own tea, laid out the little lemon cookies she liked from the Egyptian grocer downtown. But 3 o'clock came and went. At 5, I walked down to her house. Her porch plants were dry, her mailbox full. And her curtains, usually drawn just so, were closed completely. I knocked. Nothing. Left a note. Call me. I'm worried. No reply. Days passed. I told myself not to panic. People get busy. People take space. But deep down I knew. Something had shifted. Something had broken. The following Tuesday I got the letter. Plain envelope. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper, handwritten in that beautiful slanted script I knew by heart. Eleanor. If he comes again, do not speak to him. Do not give him anything. Burn the photograph. You've been my only peace. I never meant to bring this to your doorstep. Asterisk. Please believe me. I held that letter like a prayer. What had I stepped into? Who was this woman I'd shared 8 years of my life with? And more urgently, what was I supposed to do now? I didn't burn the photograph. I know she asked me to, but mercy me, I couldn't. Not yet. Not without understanding. I folded it back into the envelope, wrapped that in a silk scarf, and tucked it into the hollow of the old mahogany bread box I keep above the pantry, a place no one ever looks but God. The next morning I drove into town. Charleston Public Library's main branch, broad and sunlit, with its creaky wood floors and sleepy librarians, had been my second home once. Back in my teaching days, I'd walk those aisles like a preacher in a chapel, pulling books down like gospel. Now I walk those same halls looking for something else. I showed the librarian, a young man with thick glasses and a nervous kindness, the photo. I'm trying to identify this building, I said. It might be Cairo, 1980s or earlier. He squinted at it. Looks like the old Mukhabarat offices, he said slowly. Egypt's state security. Not public anymore. Very hush-hush. That word, Mukhabarat, sent a chill down my spine like iced tea on a winter morning. I thanked him and went home stomach-tight with knowing. When I got back, there was a voicemail on my landline. Safa. I'm sorry, she whispered. I shouldn't have involved you. You were just supposed to be my friend. Click. Just that. That evening, a white envelope slid under my front door.
Nonak. No fuotfal.
Inside was another photo, but this one, mercy me. It was me, sitting in my own kitchen, teacup in hand, Safa across from me mid-laugh, taken through the window, blurry, slightly tilted but clear enough, and written on the back in Arabic again, but this time with an English word added. Muraqabah. Watched. My hands went cold. My knees buckled. Who was watching? Mahmoud? Worse, was it Safa? That night I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one in the photograph, with all the lights off. Just me, a single candle, and muffin curled tight beneath my chair. My mind reeled. What if none of it was real? What if I'd been her cover all along? A sweet southern widow to hide behind. The perfect camouflage in a neighborhood that never asked too many questions? Or what if she'd been running? Not from justice but from something darker. Something that now had its eyes on me? At 2:17 a.m. I heard a sound. A soft scrape at the back door. Not the wind. Something slower. Deliberate. I rose, heart slamming in my chest. Inched toward the back of the house. And there, taped to the outside of the glass pane, another note. Written in block letters. This time in English. Thursday. Switch the cups. That's all it said. Thursday came like a storm that don't show on the radar. I spent the whole morning in silence. No jazz on the record player. No humming while I watered the hydrangeas. Just stillness, tight and strange. Even Muffin kept close, like she sensed the weight in the air. At 2:55, I laid out the table like always, tea tray polished, sugar cubes in the little glass bowl, 2 cups side by side. Hers was a deep plum this time, painted with tiny silver cranes. Mine white porcelain with blue cornflowers. The usual. But this time I reversed them. Just like the note said. She arrived at 3:01 as if nothing had changed. Except everything had. Safa wore olive green that day. A long tunic, sleeves to the wrist, scarf wrapped tighter than usual. She didn't smile when she came in. Didn't offer her usual greeting. Just looked at the cups. Then at me. I held her gaze longer than I ever had. I thought we might switch today, I said softly. Just for something new. A pause. Then she nodded. Of course. We sat. She poured, slow and steady, but I saw it, the slight tremble in her wrist. The hesitation before she handed me my cup. Except now it was hers. And mercy. I sipped. She watched. The taste was the same. Jasmine. Orange blossom. Mint. But underneath it there was something else. Something metallic. Sharp. Like the edge of a secret. Her cup, my usual, sat untouched before her. Minutes passed. Neither of us spoke. Then she reached into her bag, pulled out a small vial, uncorked it, and poured its contents into the cup meant for her. The one I usually drank from. The liquid inside was clear, odorless. She looked me in the eye. I never meant to hurt you, she said. My breath caught. What is that? She didn't answer. Just pushed the cup across the table to me. For you to see. I stared at it, then back at her. Drink it, I said, voice low. If it's nothing, drink it. Silence. Her hand trembled. She pushed the cup away.
No.
And in that moment the years fell like glass around us. The garden days. The laughter. The comfort. All of it cracked. You were poison in me? My voice came out hollow. I was protecting you, she said, tears welling. From them. I stood, the chair scraping loud against the floor. But she didn't rise. Didn't chase me. Just whispered. I had no choice. I left the house, heart thudding in my ears, tears burning hot against my cheeks. I didn't lock the door behind me. Didn't look back. Because I knew. I didn't just lose a friend that day. I'd been a pawn. In a game I still didn't understand. But mercy. I was about to. The rain came heavy that night, like heaven had something to weep for. I didn't sleep. I just sat on the floor of my bedroom. The photo and letter spread out before me like tarot cards no one wanted to read. The house groaned in the wind, old bones remembering storms from long ago. And somewhere in the dark, I made a decision. I needed to know who she really was. Not the woman who brought lentil soup and mint tea. Not the gentle widow with a quiet grace. But the truth of her. What she ran from, who she feared, what she'd put in my cup. So I called Marcus. I hadn't told my son anything. Not really. He called every Sunday from wherever he was stationed, checking in with a tenderness that always caught me off guard. But that night I told him everything. Every strange visit. Every note. The cups. The switch. He went quiet for a long while. Then said, Mama, listen to me. Do not talk to anyone else. Not until I get there. Marcus, you're in Bahrain. I'll be in Charleston by tomorrow night. He hung up before I could argue. And mercy me when your child speaks with that kind of fear in his voice. Not for himself, but for you, you listen. By noon the next day, Safa's house was empty. No car in the drive. Porch plants gone. Curtains drawn. It was like she'd never been there. I called the number she once gave me. For emergencies only. Disconnected. I walked over and knocked. No answer. Then I did something I'd never done before. I opened her door. It was unlocked. Inside silence. Not the cozy, candle-warmed kind I knew. But a silence that echoed. Furniture gone.
All spare.
Kitchen stripped. Just shadows and dust. Except for one thing. On the floor of the living room, right where the rug used to be, lay the scarf. The plum one with the silver pin. Pinned to it a note. Don't trust Mahmoud. Don't trust anyone. Tell Marcus it wasn't me. That's all. I clutched the scarf to my chest, heart pounding. Just then I heard a sound. The back door. Footsteps. I froze. And then mercy, a voice. Mrs. Whitford? It's Marcus. I ran. Threw my arms around him like I hadn't since he was 12. He held me tighter than he ever had. And in that embrace I broke. Every mask I'd worn, every polite silence I'd held, it shattered. I told him everything again through sobs and shaking. And when I was done, he looked at the note, the scarf, the empty house. And he said, Mama, this goes deeper than you know. Safa wasn't running from a man. He paused. She was running from a country. Marcus didn't say much at first. He just paced that hollow living room, boots echoing against the wood. The scarf, still warm from my hands, hung from his fingers like a flag from a fallen side. Marcus, I finally said, voice cracked and brittle. You said she was running from a country. What does that mean? He sighed, pulled out his phone, showed me a grainy government database. Scrawling, tapping, then stopped. There she was, Safa Hassan, but not as I knew her. There were 3 photos. One younger, almost teenage. One from the 90s, hard-eyed and fierce. And one I'd never seen recent, taken from afar like a surveillance shot. Underneath her name were the words, Target, Class A defector. Status, high risk. My blood ran cold. Marcus explained slowly like I was made of glass. Safa worked for Egyptian internal intelligence. Mukhabarat. Back in the 80s and 90s she translated files, state secrets, interrogation summaries, dissident profiles. Not just for Egypt. For multiple agencies. There was a whole network. I could barely breathe. She left them in 2002, he went on. Went dark. Nobody knew where she was. Until she showed up in Charleston. I staggered back. Sat on the floor like my knees gave out. She poisoned me? He knelt beside me.
No.
I don't think she ever meant to hurt you. I think she used the tea as a kind of signal. Maybe even as protection. That switch you made. That wasn't about poison. He pulled out the photograph again. It was about proof. Someone was watching. She knew it. They were waiting for her to slip up. And Mahmoud. I whispered. He nodded. Not just an old colleague. A fixer. A cleaner. Someone whose job it is to close loose ends. I looked at him, the boy I raised, now a man forged in war and wind, and said, she sat in this kitchen every week for 8 years. That wasn't pretend. He took my hand. I know. We went through the rest of her house together. Every drawer. Every closet. Most were empty. But in the attic, behind the insulation panel, Marcus found a small box. Inside, a flash drive. A ring. And a photograph. Of Safa, me and Muffin. Sitting on my porch. Laughing. The back was blank. But it didn't need a caption. It was the truth. And the truth, my dear, sometimes it don't come with answers. Just consequences. That night, we turned the flash drive over to federal agents Marcus trusted. Quietly. Without headlines. They took it. And they told us one thing. She may have saved lives. Or ended them. We may never know. And then they left. And Safa was gone. The days that followed were like walking through fog. I'd lived a quiet life. Tended roses, baked cornbread, wrote thank you cards in cursive with a fountain pen. But now, I jumped at shadows. I kept the porch light on all night. I stopped drinking tea. I couldn't trust the ritual anymore. Even Muffin felt it. She'd perch at the windowsill longer than usual, tail twitching, eyes locked on the trees like she expected someone to come out of M. But no one did. Safa was gone. Not in the way folks drift apart or move to warmer places. No, this was vanishing. Clean. Precise. Like a chapter torn from a book, leaving behind only the ghost of its weight. The FBI didn't come back. They didn't call either. Marcus said that was a good sign, that it meant she wasn't a danger. That maybe she'd struck a deal. Maybe she'd started over again. But my heart didn't rest. I found myself reaching for the second cup on Thursdays like muscle memory. And every time I saw it empty, it was like grieving all over again. Was any of it real? The story she told about her garden in Alexandria, her husband Amir, the way she'd hum that lullaby under her breath when she stirred the honey, were those truths or fabrications? I didn't know anymore. One morning a package arrived. No return address. Inside one single item. Her cornflower teacup. The one that was mine usually. Wrapped in linen. Unbroken. And a note tucked inside. For your Thursdays. Thank you for not a skin until it mattered. That was all. I held that cup to my chest and cried like I hadn't cried since the day I folded Charles's shirts for the last time. Because mercy me, I still missed her. Even if she'd lied. Even if she'd used me. Even if the woman I knew never truly existed. There was something between us that had been real. And grief, as I've come to learn, don't care about the details. Grief, my dear, is a strange guest. It don't knock before and errand. It just shows up, sits in your kitchen chair, drinks your silence, and stares at you with familiar eyes. And that's how those weeks passed, with grief sitting right where Safa used to. Marcus stayed with me a while longer. Longer than he ever had since he'd left home. And in that time we talked more than we had in years. He asked questions I wasn't ready to answer before. About Charles. About my loneliness. About the hollow places I'd covered with teacups and recipes and quiet conversations. One night, as we sat on the back porch, he said, "You loved her, didn't you? Even with all the not knowing." I looked at the stars, Carolina bright and sharp, and nodded. I reckon I did. Not the way people expect. But I did. He didn't judge me. Just placed his hand on mine, warm and steady. "She protected you," he said. "In her way. Whatever she did. She didn't let it touch you." "But it did touch me," I whispered. "And it changed me. Because it had. I was no longer the woman who smiled kindly through the window, content with her silence. I had been pulled into a world of shadows and truths I hadn't asked for. And mercy. It had scorched something inside me. The next Sunday I went to church. First time in a long while. I wore a dress Safa once complimented, pale lavender soft cotton. The preacher spoke of forgiveness that morning, of betrayal and what it means to still love someone who broke your trust. I cried through the whole sermon. Not loud, just quiet tears that soaked into the pages of my hymnal. Afterward I placed Safa's cornflower cup on the altar, wrapped in linen, with a single white gardenia inside. No one asked why, and I didn't explain, because sometimes forgiveness is a private thing. Sometimes it's not about absolving the other person. It's about setting your own heart down to rest. I walked home lighter that day. Not healed, not whole, but lighter. And sometimes, that's enough to begin again. The house felt different after that. Not haunted exactly, but tender. Like it had exhaled after holding its breath too long. I stopped waiting for the knock on Thursdays. Stopped setting out teacups. The ritual ended, but the ache remained, soft and dull, like a bruise that wouldn't quite fade. So I did what I always do when I don't know what to do. I wrote. Pages and pages, filling old journals with every memory, every conversation, every quiet glance across my kitchen table. I wrote down the smell of her tea, sweet and citrusy, and the way her laugh would catch like wind in chimes. I wrote about the scarf she left behind. The photo. The look in her eyes when she refused to drink. It wasn't for anyone else. Just me. Because if I didn't anchor it somewhere, it'd drift. And mercy me, I couldn't lose it all. Not the good, not even the terrible. One afternoon as I was writing, I found myself drawing her name in cursive over and over. Safa. A name that means purity in Arabic. I stared at it for a long while. How strange, I thought, to name a storm something so gentle. That night I walked the garden. The roses were in full bloom, showing off as Charles used to say. The air was thick with jasmine and summer heat. I paused by the old iron bench and looked up at the stars. For the first time I whispered her name aloud. Not with anger. Not with grief. Just with acknowledgement. Wherever you are, I said. I hope you found some peace. Muffin rubbed against my ankle, purring like a lullaby. And the wind picked up just a little, like the earth heard me. Like maybe she did too. Weeks turned into months. The garden faded, bloomed again. Holidays passed. Olivia brought the boys down for Christmas, and Marcus sent me a postcard from Morocco saying he was following up on something personal, though he didn't say what. I suspected it had to do with Safa. He never admitted it. But I knew. The ache softened over time. I stopped looking over my shoulder. Stopped flinching at every knock. Still I kept the scarf. Folded neatly in my top drawer. Between the lavender sachets and the pearls I never wear. Some mornings I'd take it out, let the silk run through my fingers, and wonder if maybe she did love me in her own way. If love could live alongside secrets, or if it only ever survives in spite of them. One quiet evening I pulled out the cornflower cup, set it down on the table, brewed a pot of tea, not her blend but mine this time. Earl Grey with a touch of honey. I poured a cup, and drank it. Alone. But not lonely. Because grief, when tended to with patience, can become a kind of companion. Not one you invite, but one you learn to sit beside. And somewhere along the way, that pain had become something else. Not closure, no, not quite. But understanding. I never saw her again. Not in person. But once late one night I received a postcard. No return address. No name. Just an image of Alexandria's harbor. And 3 words. Thursdays still matter. I pressed the card to my lips, tears catching at the corners of my eyes. Mine too, I whispered. And mercy me, I meant it. I suppose we all reckon with things in our own way. For some it's loud confrontation, answers, demands. For others like me it's quieter. Slower. Like mending lace by hand, thread by thread, till the holes are small enough to live with. After that postcard from Alexandria, something in me stirred. Not fear. Not longing either. Just unfinishedness. So I went looking for peace. Not by chasing her down, mercy, no. I wasn't trying to drag the past back. But I did need to understand it, not just feel it. So I visited someone I hadn't seen in years. Fatima. She and Safa had crossed paths once, years ago at the Middle Eastern grocery down near Cannon Street. They spoke in Arabic, short and warm. After that, they'd wave when they saw each other, never more. But I remembered the gentleness in Fatima's eyes, the way she looked at Safa like a woman who'd seen the same war from a different shore. Her shop smelled of spices and old stories. As I stepped inside, wind chimes on the door jingled like memories calling me home. She smiled wide and worn. "Eleanor," she said. "It's been too long." I didn't know how to begin. But mercy me, my eyes did the speakin'. She sat me down with cinnamon tea and waited. "I need to ask you about her," I said finally. "Safa." She didn't flinch. Just nodded. "You miss her." I closed my eyes. "Every Thursday." She folded her hands. She was not a perfect woman. But she was good. Was she dangerous? A pause. She was dangerous to the men who thought they owned her past. That sat between us like a truth too big to hold. Fatima continued. Safa carried things no one should have to carry. Things she translated, things she chose not to translate. That's what marked her. She made a choice. And it cost her everything. I clutched the teacup, heart thudded in. "She loved you," she added soft. I saw it in her eyes. "You were her first real home in years." A tear slipped down my cheek. She never said. She didn't need to. And mercy me, I believed her. Because love, real love, don't always announce itself. Sometimes it just shows up, every Thursday at 3 o'clock, and pours you tea with a smile. I walked home from Fatima's with a quiet in my chest I hadn't known in months. Not peace exactly, but clarity. Like the morning fog had lifted just enough to see the road ahead. The truth was this. Safa had lived in fear. In exile. In borrowed time and borrowed names. But here in my kitchen she'd found something she hadn't had in a long while. Sanctuary. And I'd been part of that. I wasn't just a pawn. I was a harbor. That night I pulled out my journal, the big leather-bound one Charles gave me on our 25th anniversary, and I wrote for hours. Not just about her but about me. How I'd gone from a woman who lived in the echoes of the past, to someone who demanded answers. How love, even cloaked in lies, had opened me again. How pain had become the soil for something truer to grow. And then I wrote her a letter. Safa, forgive you. Not because you asked. Not because you deserve it. But because I deserve peace. And I know now you did what you had to. You carried the weight. And when you couldn't anymore, you placed some of it with me. It hurt. But mercy me, I carried it too. And I'm still here. Still drinking tea. Still watering the roses. Still thinking of you every Thursday. Be well wherever you are. You were real to me. And that's enough. I folded the letter, tucked it into the cornflower cup, and placed it high on the kitchen shelf, where the sun hits just right in the afternoon. Stays there still. A reminder, not of betrayal, but of what comes after. Because reckoning, my dear, is not just about facing the storm. It's about deciding what you'll plant in the soil it leaves behind. Spring came soft that year. The kind of spring that don't make a fuss. It just slides in quietly, coaxing the daffodils out of the soil and waking the robins from their slumber. The kind of spring that feels like a gentle apology for all that winter took. And with it came a kind of return. Not of Safa, but of me. I started saying yes to more things. Dinner with the ladies from church. A watercolor class down at the rec center. Even let Olivia drag me to Atlanta for a weekend with the grandboys, where I slept on a couch too short and ate pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. Life, it turned out, was still humming along. One Thursday afternoon, months after the dust had settled, I received a package. International postage. Montreal return address. Inside a book. Worn leather cover. Arabic script embossed in gold. And a note, handwritten in neat English. My mother left this for you. She said you'd understand the parts that matter, even if you couldn't read them all. Thank you for loving her when she forgot how to love herself. Asterisk. Layla asterisk. My hands trembled. The book was a collection of poems. Some translated. Some not. One was marked with a ribbon. Its English title read, The Tea That Watched the Silence. And beneath it a verse. She never drank from her own cup. because trust is a scar, not a gift. But she poured each Thursday with hands that still remembered softness. And in a town of slow rain and kindness, she found a woman who let her be human, even when she didn't deserve it, even when the tea turned bitter. I pressed the page to my chest, because mercy me, I did understand. Not every word, but the ones that mattered. That night I poured myself a cup, sat at the table, alone, and smiled, because this time the bitterness in the tea tasted like closure. The years rolled on as they do. Marcus came home more often. Olivia softened, bless her, stopped trying to fix me and just sat beside me instead, listening to jazz records and helping me rearrange the living room like it might shake loose the sorrow in the corners. The Thursdays never quite returned to what they were. And I reckon that's all right. Not everything needs to be rebuilt the same way it stood before. Instead, I made a new ritual. Every Thursday around 3, I'd sit on the back porch, not in mourning but in reflection, with my cornflower cup and a notebook. I'd write little vignettes, memories, recipes, truths I'd once been afraid to say aloud. Sometimes neighbors would wander by. Sometimes I'd invite them in for tea. Never the same kind twice. Because variety, I'd say with a smile, keeps life from Surin. Safa's name faded from conversation, as names often do. But not from me. Never from me. She remains a hush in the room when I steep the water just right. A presence in the silence between sips. A reminder that even the most mysterious souls can still leave behind something worth keeping. One day not long ago, a woman knocked on my door. Young, early 30s. Modest scarf, soft accent. Said she just moved into the neighborhood 2 doors down. I heard you used to have tea with someone who looked a little like me. I blinked, heart-catchin'. She smiled, nervous. I was told to find you. Said you might understand things others wouldn't. I looked at her, not just looked but saw. Saw the fear she wore like perfume. The loneliness stitched in her collar. And I opened the door wider. Well, my dear, I said, I've got a kettle on the stove and a brand new blend to try. You drink mint. She smiled, wide and real. Ido. As we sat and poured, I realized the world keeps whispering old truths into new ears. And it was my turn to listen, to make room, to keep the ritual alive, not as a memory, but as a welcome. It's funny, isn't it? How life don't always give you a bow-wrapped ending. Just a slow softening of the sharp parts. Some days I still catch myself setting out 2 cups. Old habits. Muscle memory. Grief's echo. But now I fill both. One for me. And one for whoever might need to sit a while. Neighbor, stranger, memory, or ghost. The cornflower cup stays with me. Cracked now near the rim but still whole. Still holden. And inside it lives the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. Words I've come to understand don't always need speaking. Safa was many things. A mystery. A protector. A liar. A friend. She was a mirror too, showing me how deep love can run, even when built on sand and shadow. And mercy me, she taught me that trust is not a guarantee. It's a choice. Sometimes a dangerous one, but still worth making. So if ever you find yourself fasten a smile you're not sure you can trust, remember, sometimes the truth lives in the switch. And sometimes the deepest truths are poured gently, in silence, at 3 o'clock on a Thursday. If she always served me tea with a smile, until I switched cups and learned the truth opened something quiet in your soul, my dear, I'd surely love to know what stayed with you. Leave me a note down below. Share it with someone who's maybe been carrying a complicated love. And subscribe if you'd like to sit with me again one day soon. Some betrayals don't arrive with fury. They come softly, with jasmine on the air and kindness in their hands. And yet somehow we find our way back to peace. May you always have the courage to switch the cup when your heart tells you to. And may you find someone who sees you, even when the tea turns bitter.